Question of government incentives. Does anybody else, Guido or?
I would like to add to Bill. I was nodding heavily, so fully agree. I think when you go to events, you speak at events, quite often somewhere the first or second or third question from a journalist is about, and when you talk about smart grid, and who is going to pay for this? The poor consumer. And it's almost, I make the same comment Bill makes, is that, and I think that sometimes where we're not helping each other. So who's going to pay for it if we're not going to do this, right? Because I think the general public, and many of our government leaders, by the way, still don't know what problems we're going to run into if we maintain the status quo. So I think it's an incredibly important topic, and that's why I think it's also important that we all have a good common understanding about why this is important. Right. And I think we need to do a better job, by the way, in our event this week. We have a special panel about cost-benefit analysis, right? I think we need to do a much better job. Utilities are always not too forward-coming in sharing that information for sometimes good reasons, but I think we need to do a better job as an ecosystem bringing some of the benefits across of these investments.
Mm-hmm. And if I could add another example about the natural gas example, and I spent a lot of time working with the natural gas industry and developing next generation gas turbines back in the 90s, early 2000s. And the United States saw a gas bubble in the 90s. They made hundreds of millions of dollars of investments, and 10 years later they sold them off for 10 cents on the dollar. The utility companies, a lot of companies went bankrupt. And I think we have a strong history in the United States of relying on one technology solution and thinking that we've got the answer, whether it's ethanol or whatever else. And I think we have to really approach this as a portfolio and think about it as balancing how we go forward to maximize our potential, knowing that any technology may run into problems, whether it's an ultimate shortage of oil or gas or coal or whatever, or uranium, and really balance how do we get a mixture that allows us the most security as a nation.
Osama-san, any additional comments?
I mean, I totally agree. I mean, currently the oil price is what it is now. So, of course, renewable energy is not is more expensive than oil. But 30 years from now, which is not too far away, who knows? So, and as I think we saw, the electricity grid is not easy to change. You cannot change it in 5 years. You have to change it gradually, so that and learn from experience. Mm-hmm. So what we have to do that is why I at least think that smart grid or trying to change the grid gradually is actually something that has to be done or has to be started right now. Whether we make all of the investments right now, that probably is not a good answer, but we have to learn and make experiments so that we can change from here to 30 years from now gradually and make the investments more manageable. I think that's what we have to do.
I fully agree also on that comment, that on the risk that we had last year at our big event together with the DOE, we had Steve Shu speaking, and a great speaker, by the way, very interactive, but he made a comment about electric vehicle, and now I might do a misjustice now, Bill, but he made a comment about how long it would take for 1% of the vehicles to be electric vehicles, right, on the road. So it's almost, I took a little bit like we have time. And exactly on Osamu's point is that these investments the utility company is doing in infrastructure, they are lasting 20, 30 years, right? So in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, you might look back at some of the investments of today and say, wow, did we do excuse my English, shitty investment there, right? And so I think that notion is also not, on the same topic, is not broadly understood how long it often takes. And utility companies today are investing billions in their infrastructure. So is some of that investment done wisely enough, right? Could some of that investment be done in a different way, more in support and to build that flexibility we need in years to come?
Absolutely. I would also add a fourth maybe dimension to this, Tom, because in addition to looking at investments in technology and government policies to help underwrite some of the risks in advancing technology, I think you also need to look at it from the perspective of the other investments that are necessary besides directly into those technologies. We've talked a lot in this conference about the necessity to have stable economies, a stable environment for economies to grow, for example, particularly within the Pacific region, and how the bilateral arrangements between Japan and the U.S. is so important to that stability. you will find, certainly at least on the U.S. side and on the defense presence on the U.S. side, they are very much involved in appreciating how soft power, you've heard the term used previously as well, how soft power and investments in helping economies diversify away from single sources of energy because of the vulnerabilities. Therefore, the risks to security in this region have implications thereof. And so it's not only the direct economics associated with promoting these types of technologies, but from a broader standpoint, the move to clean and green technologies throughout the region, I think, has many other dimensions for which, if you did not address this movement, would result in much more costlier investments as well. So the security issue is something that's real, that's out there. There's money associated with that, and it translates directly to you as a banker in terms of how well you do and how well your bank performs, I think, within this region as well.